Right, so we're live. We're recording now. I just wanted to welcome everybody who's tuned in at the moment, and obviously our three panelists. This is the second webinar in our series on how forward-thinking companies are growing and hiring during this unique time. My name is John Lennon. I'm the managing director of a company called Thrive. I'm super excited about today's discussion, and you'll be very glad to hear that I won't be talking very much at all. We have an amazing panel featuring, three of the brightest minds in Germany's tech scene. So it'll be these guys who'll be doing most of the talking, and they'll be discussing primarily how they've been navigating these difficult times and these troubled times. So I must say, this webinar series isn't just about companies hiring and growing. We all know that this has been a difficult time, a challenging time, and many companies, have faced multiple challenges that they've never seen before. So our panel of three experts going to be sharing their advice on how they and their companies have adapted in this new world. In terms of kind of general housekeeping, the webinar is just going to last for just under 1 hour. We will finish at 1 on the dot because I know that everybody has busy lives. It will be recorded as well, so it will be sent to you this afternoon if you'd like to watch it back again. And yes, you will be able to participate as well in a couple of ways. So I'd like to encourage you to write some questions using the chat area throughout the webinar. We'll then ask those questions if we have time to our experts. And we've also created 3 polls, so 3 votes, just around the areas of your hiring and onboarding at the moment, and we will reveal those answers at the end as well. But anyway, I think it's more than enough of listening to me. So I'd like to introduce our 3 wonderful experts. We're really lucky to have 3 gentlemen who are very active in the industry, and you might already know them or know their faces, recognize their faces. First up, we have Felipe Furlan de Silva, who is the VP of Engineering for Happycar in Hamburg. We also have Saad Ali Jean, who is Engineering Manager at Flixbus in Berlin. And last but not least, we have Nikita Belokopytov, who is the Head of Engineering for Nepos GmbH. I hope I got that right there, Nikita. So yeah, how is everyone doing today?
I'm doing fine. It's great weather. I'm sort of on vacation right now, so I'm being completely chill and relaxed. And it definitely helps to be on vacation during these uneasy times. I'm just happy that I can get some minutes of rest. And I'm gonna have my kid coming in June, so it's literally the last weeks before everything changes. So it's a very exciting time of my life.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear.
Yeah, on my part, I'm doing very good too. We're very excited here in Happycar because we are launching a new product this week. So the quarantine new results field, it's going to be kind of tricky, but very, very nice project. And also the weather is fantastic here in Hamburg.
Yeah, I would like to mention thank you, John, for inviting us. Happy to be part of this awesome panel. The pleasure is all mine. Yeah, it's been nice weather here in Berlin as well. The sun is shining. What else we can ask for? And yeah, looking forward to the webinar.
Excellent. Well, again, thank all 3 of you, for your time. But I'd like to, kick off just by asking you all, how this situation has affected you, I guess, on a personal level. This webinar is, of course, about, you and your companies in this particular climate. But I feel also it's important as well, to talk about things on a personal level. So I think it's affected everybody in different ways. Me personally, I found it quite difficult to adapt at first, I think, because I've traditionally never worked from home, done anything like that. I quite like a routine. And at first I found it quite difficult, I must say. But during the time I've adapted, I feel, and now I feel a lot more comfortable. But yeah, I mean, and Nikita, I mean, how have you kind of found this time in a personal sense?
I've worked remotely before as an individual contributor, and I've always felt sort of like disconnected from the rest of the team. And I was just happy when my Jira would have enough tickets for me to work on, and we would in general just like ad hoc call each other with the engineers to collaborate on some of the issues. And every time when there would be like an all hands meeting or some kind of like a larger situation going on, it would be in general quite difficult. There would be echo, people would not hear you through the first time. So I remember these lessons, and we tried to incorporate them into our work in during these times. However, it's still tough. I'm also lucky that the team that we had was already assembled, and we already were working together for a while. So it was not a lot of stress. However, changing daily communication from face-to-face to mainly written one on Slack, it created some friction there. Basically, people who would previously understand each other from a couple of words started to have some arguments and discussions, and it was not their fault at all. It's just like a different mode of communication. So this adjustment is still ongoing, and if it would be up to me, I would work the majority of time from the office, face to face. However, I also understand that remote work is something that's here to stay. And if there is no need to come to the office, why should you?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think, I think something we should discuss later is about the remote work, and that it's more than likely here to stay now. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. How about you, Saad? How have you found this on a personal level?
It's been a very interesting journey for me so far. On a personal level, I just got more curious, I would say. And this curiosity actually drives me more into this positive direction. That's okay, what's next now? We have been now into this situation for a while, and we are still now seeing how the situation develops over time. And being constantly staying in this curious zone gives me a kind of flexibility to try several new things. I learned a lot of things over time, and we have a culture of boldness and open culture in our organization, which kind of help us in moving forward in these turbulence times, I would say. Yeah, I'm curious. I'm still curious. I'm looking forward to see how situation develops over time and see how we can tackle this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I think there are lots of positives to come out of this time, and I'm sure we'll pick up on those later as well. And yes, Felipe, how about you?
Well, in my perspective, it's very hard to split the personal impact to the company impact, because Happy Car is in the travel industry, and as the borders were closed, and our business was like one of the most impacted during this crisis. So basically, we were supposed to be in high season now, which is the summer in Europe, and suddenly we had to change every single plan we had for the company. So personally, it was kind of frustrating in the beginning, because this is the time when everybody who works on a B2C company knows when you start having a lot of bookings and a lot of clients, the dashboards are nice, and then you start seeing the not so nice dashboards, and you had to change the whole plan you had for the year. So basically, this was the first impact, and the second one is the loneliness, because you are really without seeing anyone. You cannot go out of your home. You are just you and yourself. But I took like nice lessons for that, and we're trying to reach them.
Yeah. Again, I think another great point. The where does the personal and the business life kind of how can you distinguish that at the moment? I think that's a really interesting point. Again, for me, I feel like it's all kind of merged into one, and if that's kind of I'm not sure, how productive or healthy that is, but yeah, I think it's certainly an interesting time. I think most companies and people have adapted. That kind of leads me on to another question, I guess, which would be to talk about kind of how your company's kind of day-to-day work, your focus have changed, during this time. In the first webinar, we spoke to 3 lovely ladies, and they spoke about how for one company the attention had changed to kind of trying to sort out things behind the scenes, so making grant applications, focusing on their websites, more time to plan as well for the future. So yeah, I guess I'll kick off with you, Saad. I mean, in terms of your company's day-to-day work and focus, how has that changed?
I think as my fellow panelist has also mentioned, we are also like into the same mobility business, and we got initial kind of pretty significant hit because most of our operations around the Europe went to hibernation, and they are still in the hibernation mode. Demand is now started to picking up as the countries will pick up these restrictions. But yeah, being a product-led company with a huge part of tech and operations are involved, you really need to be super clear on that. Okay, what we are going to now focus next, because if all of the operations are kind of stopped, you need to actually revisit your own priorities. We actually kind of revisited our strategic intents and all of the product initiatives which we have planned initially for this year. And I mean, that's all what you need to do in these kind of circumstances. Being a resilient organization, how quickly you respond to certain changes would actually define your success. So it's not only about survival at this moment, it's more about how quickly you can ramp up and how smartly you would ramp up once the demand will start to pick up again. So we actually focused on now what matters most for us. Certainly automation, monitoring, and measurability got more traction because those are the topics which will definitely help you in the ramp up phase. So we actually revisited our whole priorities, and we made sure that now we are focusing on the right stuff which matters for us now.
Yeah, we spoke to Anna Daranova a few weeks ago from Flixbus, and she mentioned a lot of positive changes at Flixbus as well, and it's great to kind of hear you reinforce that as well. It doesn't have to be a time just for survival. It can also be a time for growth and to adapt as well. Cool. And Nikita, how about you in terms of your company's kind of day-to-day focus? How has that changed? How has that shifted?
We're a bit earlier in our life cycle, right? So we're not a big company. We're looking for the product market fit. And if previously we could think about, okay, so let's go wide and see what sticks there. Now we understand that in the current environment, the value that we can provide to our users has become quite quintessential because we're building a platform for seniors, and it's a platform that basically is an internet for the seniors. So communication is one of the major parts, it's one of the major needs for the seniors that they turn to the internet for. And so we decided to focus our attention on that part and just go all in, and we prioritize it over everything else. And so we're trying to roll it out as fast as possible. And there are a couple of interesting things that we've noticed is that during the peaks of the pandemic, somehow the engagement from our target audience with our platform has actually fallen. And it was, I think, like as a part of a data analyst, I was looking at this, and I can explain it only as people want to spend more time with their closed ones. Maybe they're watching the television more. Maybe they're getting their information from other channels. So maybe the internet for them does not seem like a relevant enough or trustworthy enough source, in this particular target audience. So there are some changes there that we're seeing, and yeah, like we had to shift our strategy and redouble our efforts on communication part.
I've always been fascinated. I mean, I've followed Nepos for quite a while, and I've always been really interested in the idea and the product, to enable seniors to access to the internet. And yeah, it's interesting, I suppose, but it makes sense that perhaps the user kind of amount has fallen during this time as they maybe go to more traditional and safer kind of methods of getting news or whatever.
Comfort zone, exactly. This is something that almost everyone here is doing when they're stressed. We tend to go back into our comfort zone at least one leg at a time,
Well, it's very interesting. I definitely agree to that. Felipe, how about you and the guys at Happy Car? How was your focus shift shifted during the time?
So basically, the first important thing we realized is everybody, every company always pay a lot of attention on scale up the businesses. And the crisis show us how important it's also to scale down your infrastructure, your work, your focus. So usually you think about grow, and when you have this kind of crisis, it's really important to restrict a little bit your budget, how much you're spending, and so the first part was this kind of job, so reviewing everything we're doing. And the second one was a strong focus on our backstage. As a B2C company, it's also very important to analyze, my FlickBus friend knows that it's very important to know like how the customer is behaving and why he's not booking and how you show the offers. And we focus a lot on the front-end part of our application. And as we are not having a lot of customers, it's really important to also take a look on our backstage and clean the house and make everything more better for the end user. So we spend a lot of time on that. That was the basically exchange during the crisis.
Yeah, it seems to be a common theme that during this time, companies have used this to plan, to kind of go back to the drawing board and to really focus on the stuff that is vitally important.
Because for example, it doesn't make a lot of sense for you to A/B testing some feature right now when your website traffic is not so high, or where people are not able to travel and are not able to go to other countries. So what is the purpose for launching a new feature or a new behavior? And then you need to replay and do that at the right time when the demand starts coming back.
Yeah. And have you begun to see some of the demand start coming back, or is it too early for that?
Yes. Right now, yes. So Europe is actually opening the borders again, and the domestic travelings are big. So you can see like the one-way search feature from our website. People are booking a lot, getting the car in Berlin and returning it in Hamburg, for example. So these kind of changes are happening right now. The numbers are increasing again smoothly. So again, it was supposed to be a high season and everybody was going on vacation. But we're seeing this redirection for domestic destinations.
Sure. And FlixBus, Saad, I mean, have you begun to see an uptick in users?
Sorry?
Sorry, have you seen a bit of an uptick, or have you seen an increase in the last few days and weeks?
I think our operations will be starting from this week, so definitely then we would be able to see some positive trend there. It would be still too early to make or draw any conclusion right now. We need to see how the situation develops over time, but we are very optimistic that our customers are there, our users are there who are using our app, and they will definitely get back to this. But once it gets back to this like the normal we had before the pandemic, it might take some time. So that actually demands from us that how we are going to approach certain topics would make a huge difference there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And another one as well, I mean, obviously, and you mentioned that there was a bit of a fall. Have you noticed, with the easing of some restrictions, with the changes that we've seen from the governments over the last few weeks, have you seen kind of an increase again?
Yes, from Thursday onwards, as my fellow panelists have mentioned, there will be restrictions will be lifted up. So definitely there will be increase there. We already see a very positive trend when we have kind of given these vouchers to the users and asked them to buy the vouchers, which you can use that in the near future. And that those vouchers definitely have like a validity for next 1.5 or 2 years, but you can use it even whenever you want. And we saw that the users actually came back, they bought that. So positively impacted the market. So it shows that the users are there who would like to still travel once the situation gets back to at least normal, close to normal. So there is a still trend there, but actual trend will be seen once the borders will lift up their restrictions and people will be traveling again with the buses, and the situation will develop over time. So I'm pretty optimistic there. As an organization, we are still very conservative with our approach because we just want to make sure that we get it right in this turbulence time and we don't take big steps, we take baby steps there. And that's all about business agility, how you respond to the situations. And that's what we are doing. We are learning from the situation. We are still in that phase. It would be very early right now to say something. about the trend, but we can see some patterns which can drive us in the right direction in the near future.
Sure. And for you, Nikita, as well, and at Nepos, I mean, you mentioned there was a bit of a fall in terms of user coverage during that time. Have you started to notice a bit of an increase in the last few weeks with some of the changes that we've seen from government level?
Yeah, indeed. In the beginning of May, I've seen that the engagement was coming back up. And also there's something that might a bit obscure it for us, because we started to do more marketing, actually, which is a funny tactic that I don't know if it's common right now, because I know that many people are ramping down their marketing budgets. So for us, we decided to seize this opportunity and to actually try to get a bit more market. And we also see that people are coming and checking it out, and the activity of our power users has started to go back. I think it's just like less stress overall. People got used to the situation, so then now they don't have the need and comfort as much. They're ready to check it out and what's out there, how life can actually change in a positive way. So they are trying things out again.
It's interesting you mentioned as well about marketing. We've spoken to lots of HR departments and engineering managers throughout this time, and it seems to be a common feature that in the past, perhaps, marketing may have been one of the first departments or sectors that companies would either decrease or completely stop doing. But it's been great to see a lot of companies, really invest in marketing and trying to look towards the future. For Nepos, kind of in what ways have you been increasing or improving your marketing?
So it all depends on unit economics of your company, right? So if your unit economics is about acquiring people fast and then giving them value as fast as possible and getting the money for it, then right now people are not spending much, right? So marketing in this case might not make sense. However, like if your angle is actually acquiring people and making them like pay subscription or have them heavily engaged on your website, or maybe if your marketing target is increasing retention, basically, then you can go with brand marketing, you can go with content marketing, and maybe you can use like some performance marketing to check out hypothesis A or B again about your product market fit. And the theory is that right now people are bidding less on the keywords because this is where you get the traffic for the marketplaces. So then now the keywords are actually a bit cheaper, and then smaller companies can conduct cheaper experiments on the same people. So we're using this particular opportunity here to test around what is our brand message, what is the main value that Nepos has for our users. And of course, we're doing a bit of brand marketing because we believe that for our audience, trust is paramount. And if we can somehow convey the message that we're serious about their privacy, about helping them, then they will come back to us even when the pandemic stops, basically. And I think lots of other brands are also doing the same thing now, just trying to keep the positive message so they will be on top of everyone's heads when people come back and the market picks up. Yeah.
And, I don't want to talk about kind of our company too much, but I feel like it's a good opportunity to mention, at the beginning of this pandemic, we evaluated and we thought, well, if a lot of our competitors at the moment are perhaps downsizing their marketing or, perhaps not so active, then it's our opportunity to increase that. And, I certainly feel that this ties into, the idea of forward-thinking companies. I believe that it's going to be those companies that have invested in marketing and have made a bit of noise on social media, have invested, in campaigns. They'll be the ones that the customers will want to come to once this is over. And as you said, if you can convey the message as a trusted partner, then you should see a massive, uptick when this all returns to some kind of normal as well. Felipe, with HappyCart, have you guys kind of invested much or done much with marketing as well over the last few few weeks or months, or has that not been kind of a priority as such?
Actually, we had to change also the marketing strategy, more for domestic destinations. Before, so for example, a lot of Germans, when they travel, they go to Palma de Mallorca or some islands in Croatia, and that was our goal, our focus. And then we had to change for more domestic destinations. So let's make a marketing campaign for Berlin, let's make a marketing campaign for Frankfurt, and show how it's easier to rent a car than go by train, for example. So we didn't stop, but we have to change the marketing campaigns. And also one thing that is important is like most of marketing also is responsible for the organic traffic. So these can't stop, because if you just shut down your marketing department and stop looking at your organic traffic, it takes a lot of time to come back where you were. So this is also very important to keep looking. And we did that also.
Yeah, I think, you know, we're talking a lot about changes at the moment and how you guys have had to adapt and what new processes or features you've had to put in place. You know, when this all began, you know, we had to go from a company that had never done any kind of home working, remote working, and we had to use Microsoft Teams for the first time, which I didn't even know we had as part of our subscription. And of course, you know, there were a few kind of teething problems in the first few days, but I'm just curious, you know, you three guys are obviously tech guys. Your teams, I imagine, are pretty tech savvy and have used lots of different tools in the past. But what if we kick off with you, Saad, you know, what kind of changes have you had to implement in terms of like tools and methods and processes, like on a day-to-day basis? Are you kind of using Slack? Are you having regular touch points and kickoffs and meetings, etc.?
I would say in general, tech is pretty remote friendly, so you can practically work from anywhere. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of Flixbus. We had a very nice level of work-life integration. We were doing home office before as well, even before the pandemic, so it was not something completely new. The only thing which was new to us was like, now we have to do the home office. And before it was just like by choice. And sometimes when you add we have or we should, it kind of generates an extra sense of insecurity. People were insecure in the beginning, but definitely since after the pandemic hit, situation demanded more communication and more transparency. If you're working remotely, nothing can replace face-to-face communication. That's what we always advocate in agile ways of working. But as long as you have unity of purpose in place and you have transparency on vision, what you are doing, then you just need to make sure that you communicate and collaborate closely, and you make sure that teams have common touch points. They have opportunities to communicate, to collaborate, to engage. So what we did, especially, for instance, every team actually came up with their own set of ways of working, how they want to approach. But in general, what I know, a couple of them, which I would like to mention here, that some teams, they just started with 2 things. So like kind of 2 daily stand-ups every day, early in the morning, coming together and making a plan. And then by the end of the day, doing the small retrospective and trying to inspect and adapt more quickly in a closed feedback loops and in less time span, just to improve on that. We actually came up with virtual lunches and drink session in order to make sure that the teams can still have that kind of feeling, because that's something it's really hard to replace. When you're in the office, you see your colleagues, you just turn your neck around and you can speak to your colleague, can have a coffee, can have a small talk, but that's what we missed lately. And then that's why we introduced that, and it seems to me working very fine. We also started with regular newsletter or bulletin within the domains in order to make sure that we have a kind of unity of purpose and shared vision is still in place and people know that's what's going on. And one thing which I would really like to appreciate from the leadership, especially from the Flixbus, that they had these regular stand-ups, and they actually increased the frequency of these regular global stand-ups. So whenever something like this happens, it's a natural phenomena that we look upward and we look towards the leadership, that they might have some some magic sauce to make things happen. It doesn't matter whether they do have or not, but just to provide that opportunity to connect and to engage and to understand, that actually makes a huge difference. And our C-level is like connecting with the employees basically now on a weekly level. So on a weekly basis, we have these global stand-ups. They gives us a short update, what's going on, what we are going to do in the future, how we are dealing with the current situation. And that's actually helping us a lot. Before, I would say the cadence was like monthly. Now the cadence is weekly. And my teams, they really appreciate that. We got really good feedback, and we are still going with this.
I love that, and again, that's something that we've heard a lot of from a lot of companies, and even for us as a company, you know, we're a small, you know, company, especially compared to a company like Flixbus. But you know, me myself as the owner of the business, I feel so much closer, so much more connected to my teams since this period has happened than before. I feel like, you know, our team has really come together, and even though we're physically separated, I definitely feel it's done wonders for our kind of our atmosphere and our, you know, our team vibe, I guess. So yeah, I think a really good point. For you, Nikita, what kind of tools and methods have you used to communicate with your team, and how have you found that?
So what we have is Slack, first and foremost, of course, and then there is Google Meet or Google Hangouts. I'm not sure which one's that now. And so we have used those as the primary tools. And on Slack, there is a channel right now for saying hi and saying bye. There's like a check-in, check-out channel when people can come in and just have a brief chat when they're at work, when they started working. Then there is, like, every Friday, we have a win meeting. It's a part of our company culture to celebrate wins together. And after this win meeting, or right before it, we have half an hour of like coffee break. We're using a sort of tool that allows proximity-based chats, like with video calls. So imagine it's like a room where you can move your cursor as if in a computer game, and there are like small virtual rooms on your screen. And you can move your cursor, your position basically, between these virtual rooms, and you'll automatically join one discussion or another. So
cool.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting idea, and we're using it to keep this informal, and so people can drop in and drop out of different conversations and see who is where. And overall, like, the cadency of our check-ins and sort of like reports and updates has not changed much. We're still in the process of finding the right format for us. We're in between a very small company where everyone knew everything, and going into a bigger company where perhaps not everyone needs to know everything, and not everyone knows everything. So we're trying to find what is the right balance of transparency and over-communication and actually efficiency. So we're experimenting with having weekly company updates. We're experimenting with dividing updates into operational part and more strategic part. And then we're also having like weekly stand-ups for team leads. So it's we have started to communicate much more. However, it was our intention way before the pandemic started. We were just going in this direction naturally.
And yeah, Felipe, how about you guys? I think it's fairly. I believe anyway that you can't really replicate or improve upon face-to-face discussion, but it's really interesting to see so many innovative ways that teams keeping in touch. And as Nikita just said as well, you know, the level of communication, the frequency of communication may have actually increased, if anything. Felipe, yeah, what kind of tools have you used?
So basically, just one step before, for allowing the company to be remote. A special thanks for our DevOps engineering, because they had a lot of work. Basically, we had a lot of applications that were only accessible inside the office as a security measure, and they had to move everything through VPN and configure every single access. So they did a very nice job on that in a very short time. Because even though we knew about Corona, as was said before, we had to go. There was no option to come to the office, so it was mandatory, and we had to do that in I think it was 2 weeks, and they did everything happen. For communication, so also Slack. We are on the paid version of Slack, so it allows us to have these meetings with more than one participant via audio video calls. When we have to do more big meetings, we are using Zunas, so we can have the whole team together and a lot of nice features. One thing that we changed a lot is to turn on the camera, and sounds not so, I mean, it's very normal now, but in the beginning, people were not turning on his cameras and only about talking, and to see the other person is very important. Even though we are in a meeting like now, we are seeing each other, and this is what make more the connection, the human connection. For the meeting structure, we keep our daily meetings every morning to discuss what's going to be done. And we have a Friday meeting for the whole, where the C-levels are also part. So saying everything that happened that week, next week plans, and interaction, talking, and listening for the company. That's Epicor approach for that.
Cool. We've had a few questions come up there, particularly about Slack, and there was one question for Nikita, I think, just because you mentioned a couple of integrations. But are there any interesting integrations for Slack that you use or could recommend at the moment? I'm sure there are quite a few, but yeah, are there any kind of ones that you really like at the moment?
Well, actually, we're using a free version of Slack, and we don't have any integrations with it. On the side, though, we're using such things as Miro shared whiteboards. There's also a www whiteboard. So, we don't integrate directly with Slack. However, we often talk basically in a couple of tools at the same time and share the screen in this regard.
Cool. And yeah, Felipe or Saad, I mean, any other integrations or other tools that may be useful for some of the other guys?
Yeah, we do have one that I like a lot. That's the GitHub one, because then you can really have all the commits, and you can see what's going on with the team, and you can have more interaction there. We are also connected to Jira, so you can see updates on tickets and how our week is demanding, how it's increasing. And then the basic one, like some small workflows, some funny workflows, okay, it's 3 p.m., so time for you to get a coffee, talk, go for a walk or something. These are the most used ones that we have. We are a very, very huge fan of Slack, so we use it a lot.
Cool. And Saad?
Yes, we are using Office 365 stack, so definitely we will be using the Microsoft Teams, the lovely one. It has a nice integration with the Google Docs and Google Drive. It has some positive things to mention. I would like to mention here then. You can integrate with Jira, Confluence. We actually introduced some reminders for these recurring events, which are now introduced just because of pandemic, just to make sure that everybody show up into the session. We also have noise integration from Poly, where you can have extra small polls to make quick decision. For collaboration, we do have whiteboard in Microsoft Teams, but we didn't find it that intuitive. So we are also now going more into the direction of Miro board, which is more intuitive and also serves the purpose for collaboration, roadmaps, retrospectives, and all that. But we are now thinking more from short to midterm solution. If you have a Microsoft stack, we're paying for it, and as a company, we need to make sure that we can get max out of it. So for short to midterm, boards like Miro and other tools might work, but in the long term, we are still looking towards Microsoft Teams.
Cool. Interesting. And I guess kind of one of the main kind of points of discussion that we wanted to talk about is hiring. And obviously, hiring is one of the things that when economic situations happen or global pandemics, it becomes one of the main areas that kind of gets left behind. But it's been very reassuring to see a lot of companies, throughout Germany, continuing to hire. So I guess the kind of first question is, have any of you hired anybody during this time? Are you kind of hiring at the moment? And if so, yes. And if not, why not? So yeah, Saad, let's kick off with you. How's that been for you?
Yes, we actually did hiring during this pandemic as well. Actually, the hiring was scheduled even before the pandemic, but the people actually joined during the pandemic time. And we did the virtual onboarding. It was completely new experience for us. We are still learning from that situation, but it worked very fine so far. We are still building our talent network for critical skills. Initially, we were a bit more conservative with hiring. Definitely, we are not approaching as aggressive as we did in the past. Flixbus was growing like crazy, going into different countries and all that. Everything stopped. That's why I mentioned initially that we revisited all of our priorities, focused on specific countries, what we want to do and how we want to do. I would say hiring is still super important, but the other aspect to this side is like how you make sure that your current employees are still in your organization, to thinking about the retention as well. We also kind of providing an opportunity to our internal pool to give them an opportunity to grow their skill set, develop in certain areas wherever they want, and giving them an opportunity if they want to learn and scale up their skill set and competencies. So it's a kind of both ways. I would say we are not approaching this topic that aggressively, but yeah, it's still there, it's still critical, and we need to see how situation develops over time. Currently, we are investing a lot of efforts into our current pool, whatever we have, and how we can make sure we take the best out of it.
Mm-hmm. And how have your internal teams responded to the extra attention and the extra kind of focus on them being upskilled?
This is actually very much correlated to the company goals, what we are trying to do, what we are trying to achieve. And as I mentioned initially, that here business agility and the organization resilience come and play its role. How quickly you respond to certain changes would actually define your success in the ramp up phase. And how smartly would you do this? That's actually the question which we are trying to answer in our organizations. In these global stand-ups, leadership is communicating that more often, and people are now getting this. Okay, now we know when we need to understand where we want to focus and what we want to get develop over time. And people are like, sometimes they are even volunteering themselves to work in those extra projects, work into those projects where we really want to focus and we want to get them delivered, and we can deliver some value. So till now, I have seen a very open or kind of like more receiving end from the employees. I haven't seen much of the resistance there. And I mean, in tech, who doesn't want to grow? Who doesn't want to develop? Unless you are very on a stable trajectory of growth, but still, you still want to develop and you still want to grow. The only constant is change here.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear. And Felipe, at Happy Car, if you managed to onboard people during this process, have you increased or decreased, your focus in terms of hiring?
Actually, we stopped hiring during the crisis, especially because of the numbers. And again, it's not the high season, so we review our process, we review our opportunities, and why we were hiring people was more looking inside. What we did was to start a little bit more outsourcing. So we faced some part of our product that would be a better fit for outsourcing, and we made some tests on this approach. So using one of our intern guys managing an outsourced company and to see if it's going to work or not. And that was our focus. One very good point that also we are able to do is like to really rethink our business. So really see where our people are working on, what effort it's been doing, and how we can increase and create a better plan for the product and make people happier. Because it's really important to keep talents, not only hire new people, but also to make the company be able to keep them here. So we didn't have an experience actually we did have one, the accounting team, but not for the IT. For this remote onboarding, but yeah, we're not hire at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I would just like to add here that culture actually plays a vital role here. That what kind of culture you already have in your organization when you are actually shifting the priorities on a weekly basis, because we are learning from the situation. And what I really like about our leadership, that every time when they communicate and make things transparent, people actually understand that we are all in this together. So it's not only from top to down or bottom up. It kind of gives you a feeling of sense of ownership, that we are all in this together and we need to find our way moving forward. In this context, I say in Flixbus, things are pretty much in shape. We understood that we are now like kind of got this hit, and it's a pretty significant hit, and we need to make sure that we can all get it through together. That's where we actually shifted our priorities, focus, and value apart, and people actually understood that. So the ability of the organization, that how nimble and how flexible they are, would define their future. And I'm mentioning that again and again because it's all about ramp up. It's all about how quickly, like the famous saying, they say it's not about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and still moving forward. And we are exactly in that situation right now. And I'm happy to be part of this awesome team where we are still finding our ways moving forward, and everybody is still motivated to have an impact there.
Yeah, I think that's a great quote as well. I think it's a Rocky quote, right? But it's very apt, yeah. And I think the companies that are adapting and are agile and are quick to pivot are the ones that are going to hopefully see the great impact after this. So yeah, Nikita, how have you guys kind of fared in terms of hiring or onboarding, or have you not been doing that at all?
We're hiring for business critical positions. There's one person who we absolutely had to hire for our UX research department, and this was the planned hire. And the person was already in the pipeline when the crisis hit. And there is one more position that we're right now closing down. It's absolutely necessary for our business to have this person there. So on the other part, it was not a part of our budget to grow like in headcount this year, because right now we can do everything that we want to do. So for us, it did not change plans significantly. However, what we're actually thinking about right now is, as has been already previously mentioned, is that how do you retain people who are already here? Because it's like this is a crisis, right? And there's also lots of opportunity there in this crisis. And lots of companies that are hiring more aggressively because they're actually quite strong right now. And so then you have like some parts of your team who might have felt disenfranchised or not empowered before. They might start thinking, okay, maybe it's not the right company. I love everyone here, but there's another one, and this is the company that I like more. So, and there's a bit of like a chaos happening. It's like we don't know how it's going to pan out, like on the market overall. And in these situations, the choices that people make, they're a bit more emotional. So every argument in the team can end up with someone in deciding that, okay, I should go probably. So this is the exact moment when the team comes together, and everything that we've been doing before, like the culture, the empowerment, the communication, this is where it starts playing a large part of keeping the business moving forward.
Mm-hmm. It's great that all three of you have mentioned that. It's not just about kind of how we can grow or how we find new people. It's about the people that we have now, and how can we grow them? How can we invest in them, and how can we, get that buyback from them as well? So, and I feel like times like this, again, it either goes one way or the other. Either, the chaos, really impacts everything that the business does, and the leadership perhaps takes wrong choices, or they adapt, they focus on the priorities, and they actually improve as a company, and the employee trust and the employee buy-in significantly improves. And it sounds like all three of you, obviously that is an emphasis for you three at the moment, so that's great to hear as well. I wanted to ask as well about your experiences, if you have obviously onboarded. How have you found doing a virtual onboarding? Because we have done it 3 times during this time, and there are 3 colleagues that we have hired that I haven't met, which I find very, very strange, but it's worked pretty well. It's not ideal, but we have managed to onboard them, upskill them, and do the vast majority of their training virtually, which has been a real eye opener. So yeah, Nikita, how has that been for your key hire?
No, I'm just thinking that our whole engineering team, apart from myself, was onboarded remotely, and it was happening before the crisis. And actually, I just didn't even think about it. But yeah, what we're doing here is that we have we have some documents in our code base in GitHub. So there's lots of things already described, and we have a culture basically that we're fostering as a team, is that if you have a question, just ask in the public channel. If you don't know who to ask, just ask everyone, and there's somebody going to be responding. And we have also sort of like a company wiki that describes our main value points, what we're proposing for the customer, why are we doing this. The mission is very important, and it also describes our roadmaps, our projects. So we're actually quite well prepared for the remote work. So when people come on board, for them, the main questions that they remain is, how does exactly this thing work in the code, basically. So the rest of the context is there. And what I'm doing personally is that I'm trying to support people as much as possible during one-on-ones, trying to really get this feeling on the empathic level that they understand what's happening. Because I can understand that people who are just onboarding, they would like to jump right into the action. They would like to prove that they're useful. They would like to be a part of the team. So they might say, yeah, I understand that. And this is like a very thin layer, between what they think that they understand and what they actually understand. And this is as a leader, you have to push there just a bit to see whether it's actually a reality. And if you feel like maybe it's not, that this is something that you keep your eyes on, and then you can have a follow-up discussion, also remote during a call, and just follow up on that, basically.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's the biggest kind of thought at the moment, is that from my side it might be going great, the training's going great, but for this new person who has never worked in this industry before, or perhaps it's completely new to our particular field, it might not be so good for them. They might not understand. They may need some extra coaching or some training. So yeah, I think it's really important as a leader to be extra conscious and extra kind of inquisitive, just to make sure that nothing kind of goes between the gaps. I think that's a really good point. But it's difficult as well, isn't it? As a leader, to kind of know how far to go, or when to probe. Saad, for yourself, onboarding guys remotely, how's that going?
Actually, we didn't do this in our domain, but definitely I heard from my peers who are doing this in different domains. We have a kind of culture where we are heavily focused on people. We never anticipated that we had to hire someone remotely, and then we have to kind of onboard them remotely. Nevertheless, we always had the right documentation in place, the right tools and the skill set in order to make sure that we can still do this. But we never did that in the past. So we just did that during this pandemic time. And it turned out to be a pretty unique experience, definitely with some learnings as well. But what I got feedback from my peers, that it went pretty smooth. Here and there were a couple of things, but in the end, all in all, it was a smooth experience. So definitely something which we might deal more often in the future as well, something where we can improve. It's not ideal as a company if you really focus on face-to-face communication, and in the end you have to do the onboarding the very first day. People are not in front of you, they are talking to you via cameras and all that. But yeah, all in all, it was a positive experience. I didn't hear anything like, hey, this thing didn't work and red flag and we should not be doing this. It's more like everything worked pretty smooth. Let's think about how we can improve on that.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I definitely think it's here to stay. I've just the time has gone very, very quick. We have about 5 minutes left. So I just wanted to kind of round up with one last question from my side, and then hopefully we can go through a few of the questions that have been posed by our audience. I certainly believe that there have been lots of benefits to come out of this terrible situation. So I wanted to ask, I'll ask you first, for Felipe. What benefits have you seen, either personally or from a company point of view? What has been a good thing for you during this time?
I would say that it's this epidemic shows us that those guys for the risk management team, they are really important, and we never thought about them before. So we never think about the risk. We never think that this can be wrong or this can be very huge as it was. So for example, at the beginning of the crisis, we were discussing the possibilities and what's going on. And we were saying, oh, it's not so big, it's going to pass, it's going to be easier. And then everything happened. So these guys, we need to listen to them and to be prepared. And I also think it makes people more united. You can see now how important it is, the human relations. When you can't go out, when you can't go to a restaurant, when you can't go with a friend to a walk, and you need to be isolated in your apartment, you will start realizing how important this is. And I think people are going to get out of this more connected. They're going to be more, they're going to respect more other people, and they're going to be more together and not saying I can't or I won't. And this is going to be really important. And also for the team perspective, for the company perspective, we can see how important it is to be everybody in a single room, discussing, having ideas, and interacting to each other, because this is also something we were denied now. We can't. So for a product team, for example, to discuss a new feature, it's not so easy to do that remotely, even though we have all the tools. It's pretty much easier to be in the same room and discussing and having a more meeting, actually, and drawing and do things together. So I think this is the nicest part of this. Not nicest, but this is something we're going to be better after the epidemics.
Yeah. And Saad?
Just to me, I always focus a lot on the culture and organization agility, and turned out to be that this is the most critical part for the organizations, especially when you go into these uncertain times. You don't know what to do, and you are learning from the situation. So first, the learning capability of the organization, how quickly you can learn and you can inspect and adapt accordingly, and how flexible and nimble you are in order to make those changes. Whether you have flat hierarchies in place, whether you have strict processes in place, you're a kind of organization where you want to control everything, then you might be in this dilemma. You might not be that adaptable. But if you are flexible, if you have flat hierarchies, if you have open processes, you delegate most of the decisions towards the teams or towards those who are taking that decision, they kind of make through this kind of storm. And we are still learning from the situation. But what I have observed from my organization, that being flexible, being open to new ideas, being open to take bold steps in these circumstances are now far more important than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'd have to agree with that. I'd have to agree. And then finally, Nikita, what positives can you bring from this?
Yes, the positivity is more like blessing in disguise. I can see the employees, I can see the people, they are now really stepping up their game and really want to support the organization, which shows that how eager they are to support in these turbulence times, and how their willingness to learn and to improve on the current situation. So it's a very positive sign once the things get back to normal, that we have such an amazing team who is still intact with the company and still want to have an impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounds incredibly positive. I think there's a lot to take away from that. And yeah, if I ask Nikita finally, how about you? What positives can you take from this?
I don't have much to add. The folks already said the majority of my points as well. And my personal one is that I hope that this crisis moves technology forward and makes the access to technology more democratic and widespread, and so everybody benefits from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great way to end the webinar. I think that's a fantastic point, and we've already seen a few initiatives. I've seen on LinkedIn, I think it's EU against COVID hackathons, and that there are loads of social programs going on that are either looking to advance, the fight against COVID, or tech is playing such a huge role. And I think that's a great way to end this, because I hope that the barriers that may have been available, the barriers that may have been there in the past for tech or for every part of life, there may be slightly eroded moving forward. But look, we've ran out of time, guys. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten to answer some of the questions, but we will be sending this webinar round to everybody who registered, and if I I'll get round to answering some of those questions in those communications as well. But I just wanted to obviously say thank you again to Felipe, to Saad, and to Nikita as well for your time, and obviously thank you to everybody who tuned in today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
guys.
Have a great day. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye bye.